Today on Inside Utah Politics, Salt Lake City is just 2 days out from a vote on the downtown sales tax hike. Mayor Mendenhall joins the program to discuss shaping the city's development future. Plus, FAFSA failures on full display, while lawmakers say the rollout this year may have kept some students out of college. And just over a month till Election Day, we dive into how to evaluate the dozens of judges on the ballot across the state.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Today on Inside Utah Politics, Salt Lake City is just 2 days out from a vote on the downtown sales tax hike. Mayor Mendenhall joins the program to discuss shaping the city's development future. Mayor Mendenhall, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk about it. Let's get into it. The Revitalization Committee has approved the project area. Now it's down to the city to make a decision here. For someone who hasn't been fully paying attention to the process, someone at home who's hearing about it maybe for the second time, what's your pitch to the people of Salt Lake City on this project?
While a lot of this is centered and hinged on the timing of the acquisition of the Utah Hockey Club, this is really about the future of downtown for the next 50 or more years. This is about the potential of opening up our downtown from an east to west flow in a way that right now the Salt Palace impedes, and turning on the west side of Salt Lake City's downtown core in a way that we've really never seen before. It can lock in the Utah Jazz for decades to come, which is it's in the flux, honestly, if the hockey team isn't able to be fit into the Delta Center. We need both teams. We need to keep our downtown intact, and we need to look at the future of what this could mean for livability and our economy for decades to come.
For a city, you kind of have to strike that balance when it comes to having a major sports team. You're seeing the controversy in Oakland with their owner, John Fisher. We're not in that situation here in Salt Lake, but you kind of have to have that balance. What's best for the city, but also what's best for keeping some of these sports teams. How do you strike that balance in a situation where a lot of money is on the table?
You know, what we're talking about here, which is a $900 million public investment into the changes of the Delta Center to fit a National Hockey League team, but also over $300 million into the creation of this public district that surrounds it, is absolutely unique in the United States. We've seen lots of other conversations and debates about whether or not the public in any other part of the country wants to do that for a team. We are already doing that with the Utah Jazz. The city and the Larry H. Miller Group and now Smith Entertainment Group have been partners in that land and the Delta Center and the financing of it since its inception. We know it's a great deal for Salt Lake City and the state of Utah. 77% of our busiest downtown days are when the Delta Center is active. And with Smith Entertainment Group, they've doubled the number of activations at the Delta Center that are not jazz games, so concerts, other events, UFC, and it's bringing in tens of millions of dollars when they do these events around Salt Lake City. It's good for us.
Now, a lot of the public comment around this issue brought up the pitch to have the voters make the choice on this. Why do you think, in your estimation, that's not the way that we should go forward?
The only reason it really isn't an option for the November ballot is because of this timeline of the fastest acquisition the NHL has ever gone through with a new team owner, and the timeline that lays out for them to have a stadium ready for this team. When you back up from that date in about 2026, they have to start moving things pretty immediately. And the option for the city to wait until November, ratify that in early January is honestly, it's not possible, and it would force Smith Entertainment Group, I'm sorry to say, to look at probably other options outside of Salt Lake City.
So I'm going to ask you a question here, but it's going to sound like I'm simplifying the issue. But I'm trying to come from the perspective of someone in Salt Lake City who maybe is working minimum wage, maybe working 2 to 3 jobs. Costs have gone up for groceries, gas, cost of living here in Salt Lake City has gone up, and they see the number, $900 million
right,
for a 0.5% tax increase for sales inside the city, and they think, looking at $900 million, you might as well say bajillion dollars at that point.
Right.
Why can't the Smith Entertainment Group or Ryan Smith fit the bill more in this process?
Smith Entertainment Group is investing billions in this deal to get it done. The way that it works with the Delta Center and the district that includes entertainment, convention, and culture, and the convention and culture components are publicly owned through Salt Lake County mostly, with our convention center, UMOCA Art Gallery, and a Bravenel Hall. This is a public investment, and this is public space that we're talking about. Our ability as a city to keep investing in affordable housing more than we ever have in the city's history, our ability to put bus passes in the hands of every public school student in Salt Lake City and their parent, our ability to repair the roads and fill the potholes depends on a solid economy and an economy that's growing. We have seen case after case where major league teams and major downtown anchors leave for the suburbs. They're drawn by the lure of cheaper property prices, and we end up with a hollowed out downtown core that takes decades and actually billions of dollars to recover over time. That is not a real future for Salt Lake City that any of us as Salt Lakers should want. And our ability to invest in things like our Thriving in Place model that helps prevent gentrification in our neighborhoods and stabilize families, those kind of investments depend on our economy being stable, and this is the way for us to do that.
And in the agreement, you talked about a Bravenel Hall. Japantown was also brought up of kind of things that were off limits in this redevelopment, in the sense of you can't get rid of them. So tell me a little bit more. Is there anything else that was off limits in this deal, or anything that you guys are focused on with Japantown and Bravenel Hall, and make sure that they're still staples of downtown?
I would recharacterize that.
Okay.
I don't think that there was ever a phrase that says it's off limits, because
Sure.
no one was asking to take any part of what remains of Japantown. What's there today is a tiny fraction of what Japantown once was, when eminent domain was used by Salt Lake County decades ago to create the Salt Palace district that exists today. Japantown should never be smaller than it is right now, and no one wants that to happen. So what it does detail in the partnership agreement is investments that the city could make and ways that the district could complement and honor the history through their development of the Japantown that's there. Personally, I'd like to see Japantown grow, and I'd like to see that become a major attraction point for what the district could be in the future.
And is there a way in that deal to do that, to
Yes.
help it grow?
Yes. So Smith Entertainment Group essentially needs every dollar of the $900 million that the state legislation, which put this whole deal together, they need every piece of that to do this development. And so what we've done is negotiated a ticket fee that would be at different levels depending on how much your ticket price is, and that would go into the public benefits section for Salt Lakers. That includes everything from paid apprenticeships for people who are coming out of high school into college, people who want to transition in their careers, ticket access for communities in our city, public art, and Japantown investments, and many other things potentially. So that's the way that we will fund it in perpetuity.
So I want to also ask you about the efforts, with these sports teams. There's always been talk about MLB teams in Utah and things like that. When you talk about you got a hockey team, you have a basketball team, you're keeping downtown, is there ever a moment where it's like, okay, maybe we're moving too fast here, let's focus on this, maybe not try to get into every professional sport? At what point are you moving too fast, do you think?
The city is a willing partner, and as you can see from the ticket sales alone with the NHL opportunity, Salt Lakers and Utahns are ready for this leveling up of who we are, of our identity, of our downtown core, and we're showing up in ways that are doing that. We had the strongest downtown recovery post-pandemic in the nation. I think we're still leading at number 3 in the country right now. We took our hits over the last 4 or 5 years, as a lot of places in this country did. But we've come back, and we've come back stronger in a big way, doubling our downtown population in just the last 4 years. This is what we're ready for. Salt Lake City is not the entity that's buying these teams, and I think that those entities out there, the Larry H. Miller Group with their interest in MLB, Smith Entertainment Group and their acquisition of NHL, know what the market's looking like. They know what it will demand and what can be sustained, and we're happy to partner with them. It's better for the state of Utah when we have a strong, thriving downtown. It serves the whole state.
Any concerns, though, when you continue to build in downtown, especially in the Delta Center project, with cost of living, those areas and the downtown, we could potentially see a rise in cost of living because of the attraction of living downtown and living near the Delta Center. Any concerns about that? How do you stop that from becoming a major barrier for folks who want to live downtown?
I'll tell you 2 ways. One is the zoning and the tools that we put out there for the private market that incentivizes the creation of more affordable housing in all of the development that's taking place. The second, and probably the biggest one, is the money we put on the table. Salt Lake City already sets aside a portion of our tax revenue for affordable housing every single year. And in March of this year, we put $17.7 million out into the private market to say, hey, you're building housing here. We want to make sure at least a good portion of that has affordability baked into it. No matter who owns this project, no matter how long it goes on, we want to make a deal with you. And people are saying yes, developments are saying yes. We have over 4,500 new units of affordable housing that's come on during my administration. We're putting the pedal to the metal, and we're going to keep doing that. And I'll say one more thing, although rising rent costs have been really typical year after year lately, we're starting to see some cooling, not necessarily a decline, but a cooling because the capacity in the market has been growing. There's more units out there.
Then you just recently had a meeting within the last couple of weeks about the ballpark, Smith's Ballpark. The ballpark neighborhood, obviously devastated that they're losing the bees, but you're talking about the future of Smith's Ballpark. What are some of the things that you've heard about what can be done with the ballpark and the opportunities there with the bees unfortunately leaving the park?
Ballpark area is near and dear to my heart, and I've represented the area for about 11 years between city council and mayor. This is one of the most engaged, tenacious, creative communities in Salt Lake City. They are totally at the table. They're building a new table, we could say, for what could happen in the ballpark. I think that once we came to grips with the Larry H. Miller Group's decision to move the bees out of Salt Lake City, the thing that I was most excited about is that we have a chance to make that an active and attractive place more every single night and day of the year instead of just about 80 days within the summer and fall months. We want an active community center, and it's really rare that a growing city has 13.5 acres to work with. The community right now is engaging with our design consultants to build that framework. And I'll give you a hint, a lot of what they want to see is green space, open space for community gathering, places that attract and engage all ages, that are safe for families and kids, bars and restaurants also, and the kind of activity that makes it the place you have to go when you visit Salt Lake City.
And then finally, I want to wrap with this. You know, we are getting close to the winter season. I don't want to admit it because I don't want to even imagine what that's like here yet. But obviously, homelessness is going to be on the front of that. You serve on the Homeless Services Board. Tell me a little bit about the way you guys are planning forward to address the winter coming up.
We need 900 more beds than the current permanent system holds right now. And it is the task of mayors across this county to come up with a winter shelter plan and submit it to the state, as we did on August 1st. The county-wide plan could only come up with 500 more beds. At this point, it really falls onto the State Office of Homeless Services to help us find what buildings, what spaces, what possible hotels or motels we could utilize to create those 400 beds. The thing that people should know is there's been more collaboration between the governor, the state legislature, the county, and cities than ever before on addressing this tremendous shelter gap and mental health gap that is creating our tremendous homeless crisis out on the streets. The state is our partner in this. We're all on the same page about it, and fortunately, the legislature's given funding for the state to make sure these shelters can happen. We should be hearing the next couple of weeks exactly what that remaining winter bed plan is from the state.
All right, Mayor Mendenhall, thank you so much for joining Inside Utah Politics.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All righty, folks, still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, examining the failures of the FAFSA rollout. Who lawmakers say it hurt the most. Welcome back. The Utah Education Association, the largest teachers union in the state, endorsed Representative Brien King for governor. UAE's Political Action Committee says this endorsement is a direct response to Governor Spencer Cox's support of the controversial Amendment A, which would allow Utah more flexibility to use income tax funds that are typically used for public education purposes. It's worth noting that last governor's race, the UEA backed Cox. The president of the UEA, Renee Pinkney, tells us that she's confident King will champion the needs of public schools. Hundreds of thousands of students have been affected by the Department of Education's failed rollout of the FAFSA this school year. That's the free application for federal student aid. Washington correspondent Maddie Beertemple reports on the impacts and why some lawmakers are concerned it won't be fixed for next school year.
4 million missed calls,
and education botched that,
and 432,000 fewer FAFSA submissions later,
representing an overall decrease of 3%.
The Government Accountability Office says the Department of Education's new FAFSA launch hurt lower-income students the most.
These are the families that need education to help achieve an economic future.
The GAO shared findings from its new report on the FAFSA rollout. It described delays and website problems that weren't fixed for months.
For example, if you were born in the year 2000, you simply couldn't proceed.
The report also found the department knew there could be delays as early as August 2022, but didn't announce that for 7 months.
Regrettably, implementation of the law has been derailed.
Both Republicans and Democrats expressed concern about next school year's FAFSA period. It's already been pushed back to December.
Nothing I've seen or heard from federal student aid inspires confidence that the system is fixed.
Beta testing for the 2025-26 FAFSA is set to start next week.
They've verbally given us promises, but we have not seen any documents that involve what the test plans would look like.
But Education Secretary Miguel Cardona is assuring higher education leaders next FAFSA will be better. In a letter he wrote, the department is, quote, committed to learning from challenges with last year's launch and making improvements. In Washington, I'm Maddie Beertemple.
Coming up, confused on voting for judges? Well, we've got you covered. We have a live interview with a state committee tasked with keeping an eye on them when we come back. Welcome back to Inside Utah Politics. We're just over a month away from Election Day, and while everyone is familiar with the top of the ballot, some of the races towards the bottom can be a bit more mysterious. We're talking about judicial retention elections, where the voters decide whether or not some of Utah's judges will keep their jobs. Joining me today to demystify the process, is that putting a lot on you?
Yeah, a lot of pressure there.
Is Mary Margaret Pingree. She is the Executive Director of the Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission. It's a state entity that makes recommendations to voters on these elections. Mary Margaret, welcome to Inside Utah Politics.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So for folks at home who may not know the full scope of what your organization does, explain what JPEC is.
Okay. JPEC is the Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission, and we're an independent government commission that evaluates Utah's state judges, and then we provide information to voters so that they can feel confident and informed when they vote on those judges that are at the end of their ballot.
So in Utah, voters don't elect their judges, but they do get to decide how long they stay in office. So it kind of explained the idea behind that system.
So Utah has a merit selection system, which means that we focus on a judge's qualifications, a person's qualifications to be a judge. And it's that way all the way through the process, from the nominating commission, where someone applies to be a judge, and the nominating commission will pick the 5 most qualified people. It doesn't have anything to do with partisan politics or anything like that, just pure qualifications. The governor will then pick the person who he feels is most qualified. And then at the end of that whole process, the judge goes on the bench, but then voters get to decide whether a judge stays in office. So we gather information from people to provide voters with information so that they can make that decision confidently. And we focus on qualifications as well.
So what kind of goes into that information? What makes, a judge performing well or a judge not performing so well? How do you make that call?
So we have 4 categories that we evaluate a judge in, and the first is legal ability, which seems like an obvious one. The second one is integrity and judicial temperament. The third is administrative skill. And the fourth is procedural fairness. So are they able to promote fairness on the bench? So we'll survey people who spend time in a judge's courtroom. So the average voter doesn't spend time in a judge's courtroom too often, maybe a traffic ticket here and there, but not a lot of time. So we'll talk to attorneys, court staff, jurors, interpreters who spend a lot of time with a particular judge, and they will rate a judge in each of those areas. And then we share that information with the voters. We also have a team of courtroom observers that go in and evaluate a judge, whether that judge to them they perceive to be fair. That's one of the things that we look at too. And then we take public comments
So all that information is on our website, and we share it out with the voters.
So obviously fairness is obviously a big point, but when you talk about temperament, can you kind of dive in? What do you mean by temperament? What's a good judge's temperament on the bench?
Well, do they treat people with respect? Are they respectful to both sides equally? Maybe not treating one side differently than another side because of some factor. That would be something that's really important, because we find that if a person feels like they're treated fairly, then they're going to respect the decision of the court much better than they would if they felt like they just didn't get a fair shake.
Sure, and it's interesting. We talk about how people don't have you hope people don't have a lot of experience with a judge, but these elections can be very important. So it's kind of like people, maybe their experience is like what they see on TV, like a TV judge.
Yeah.
And you're not rating Judge Judy here.
No, but judges do impact people's lives.
Sure, exactly.
Pretty significantly. It could be a custody case, it could be a property dispute, it could be health care, it could be voters' rights. I think voters are pretty tuned into the ways that judges can really impact their lives. And so we need to hold judges accountable because they do have an impact on us. And this is an opportunity for voters to do that.
And then how often do we see that a judge gets recommended to lose their job? How often does that happen?
Well, every election, there are judges that receive poor evaluations. And this is how it works. We will send a judge their evaluation a couple of months before they decide whether they want to go on the ballot. And then a judge reviews it, and then they have a decision to make. If they decide to go on the ballot, then that information becomes public. If they decide not to go on the ballot, then that information stays private. So what you're seeing on the website is those judges who have decided to go on the ballot. But there are judges every cycle who receive poor evaluations.
Interesting. It's you're handing them a report card almost.
Kind of, yeah.
And then, hey, this is your report card. Do you want people to see? Do you want to take it home tomorrow and put it on the fridge or not? That's pretty interesting, an interesting process. So how does your office work through the caseload? I mean, there's a lot of judges. It differs county by county. How do you manage all of that?
We have, and this is by statute, we have an outside survey administrator who does a lot of that work independently. And that's by design, because we want to be independent. JPEC is independent from the court system. And our survey administrator is also independent from us. So we try to just keep all those independent pieces flowing, but we use some outside resources because we have a very small team.
Yeah, so it's not like you're all sitting at the lunch table together with these judges. Hey, by the way, somebody's saying this. So it's independent and keeps it that way.
Yeah.
And why is it so important? We touched on this a little bit, but to stay informed about judges, and what is the best way to do so?
The best way to be informed about judges is to go to judges.utah.gov and look at the data that's there. There's a wealth of information on the website. You can look at a summary of all the data that we collect. You can keep drilling down and finding detail after detail. You can decide what's important to you as a voter, and then you can make your decision. Do I want to retain this judge, or do I not want to retain this judge? So we try to give voters as much information as we can, and they can use whatever pieces that they find most relevant to them.
Interesting. And why is it so important that they have that information?
It's important because judges are accountable to voters. That's the end of the merit retention process. Judges should feel accountable to voters. They should feel like voters are paying attention. And so, we have to provide this information so that voters who aren't in a judge's courtroom can access it and then use it when they're voting.
Mary Margaret, thank you so much for demystifying this process. I think you
did a good job.
I think you did it, because now I fully understand it.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, stay with us. More Inside Utah Politics is coming up after the break. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories that you'd like to see, make sure to reach out. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media. On X, it's @JordanTracyTV. And on Instagram, you can search for Jordan Tracy. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We're always on. Thanks for being with us, everyone. We'll see you next week when we go Inside Utah Politics.